Hi, I'm Charles Galda, President of Vision New England, and your host for the Church in Action program, where we talk with New England leaders about the imperative to make disciples, do justice, foster unity, and share Jesus to transform New England. Today, I have two guests. First time we're doing this as a radio program with two guests, Wes and Kasey Dillon. They are the co-founders of the Four Rivers, and I'm not going to say what word comes after that because they're going to explain it to us, in Durham, New Hampshire. One of their projects includes building a partnership of ministries to resettle an Afghan family here in the States. And so really doing justice. And so Kasey, Wes, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I kind of left folks hanging. So what is the Four Rivers?
Yeah. So we, about 3 years ago, we're looking to start a new kind of church and do church a different way that's going to engage our community. And we found that it was necessary to first start a nonprofit. So we started Four Rivers Project, and then a year later started Four Rivers Church. And we started Four Rivers Project because we found that there were a number of people in our community that were eager to do good, but were uncomfortable doing that under the umbrella of a church. And so that, no problem, let's just do Four Rivers Project. And that creates a space. We think of it as a big table that we can just invite anyone that wants to invest in building a stronger community, and we can work together. And then that allows church to be church, and then project can just be a big table that a number of people can come together and work on a number of diverse initiatives.
And is that the kind of thing where I know some ministries have set up that structure where you've got one structure that can take government funding, for example, and stuff like that, because it's not a religious nonprofit, but then there's a religious nonprofit who's doing that aspect of the work together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so let's back up a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background, your story, how you came to be in the Durham area, which is what's called the seacoast of New Hampshire for folks who may not be as local to us, but the southern, almost eastern part of New Hampshire. How'd you guys end up here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Colorado, and I tell people got here as fast as I could into New England. But it was while I was in seminary and came to New Hampshire in 1999 and was part of the church planting team that was starting Crossway Christian Church in Nashua, New Hampshire. And so it was leading up to that I fell in love with New England, and I already had a passion for church planting. But when I was in Nashua, met my wife Kasey, and we got married in 2001. And then in 2003, ended up going into the marketplace and was in software and technology sales for 15 years. And then it was in 2019 that the opportunity for church planting came back around. And we made some changes, and we're fortunate enough to start Four Rivers Project and Four Rivers Church from there. But I'll let Kasey tell about where kind of her background.
Yeah. I grew up in New Hampshire, so I am a native New Englander, and I tried leaving for 3 years to go to graduate school, and then it just called me back. Once you're here, it just, for some of us, we just stay. So I grew up in Nashua, New Hampshire. That's where Wes and I met. I am actually a physician assistant, and I teach at a university in Manchester, New Hampshire, in their PA program. So I wear a couple of different hats, and also, lead Four Rivers Church with Wes. That's a bit of my background. So it's been a total honor and a true blast to be able to start a church in an area that I've called home for my whole life, but really with the folks that I call my people. These are my people,
Well, so I get the connection to Nashua. You both have a connection to Nashua. You both have a connection to New Hampshire. But how'd you land in Durham?
Yeah, go ahead. You take that, Kasey.
I went to the University of New Hampshire. That was where I did my undergraduate degree and loved it. And
which is in Durham for folks who may not know. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Which is in Durham, which is essentially where we live right now, where we've been the last 16 and a half years. But loved the area, loved being near and on and engaged with the college campus. And so when we considered moving back here after the 3 years away, this just felt like the place. It felt like the place to raise a family, start and raise a family.
Nice. And so tell us about a little bit. I want to talk about refugee resettlement, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. Where are you in the process of starting and planting a church? What's been happening with that? Fill us in a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, so it was 2019 that we started working with Stadia, which is our partner for church planting, and started that whole process. It's like a good 6 months to a year of sort of like preparation. Started that in 2019. Little did we know there's going to be this sort of global event coming up in 2020. So when 2020 is when we were planning to launch Four Rivers Church, and when COVID hit, that really caused us to pause, and we started asking the question: what opportunities does this present to us? Rather than being frustrated that our whole schedule got thrown off. And that's when we really discovered the need for Four Rivers Project. And we did a number of initiatives that were centered around bringing like relief to those that were impacted by COVID, everything from like food drives to there's a couple of initiatives we did around like foster care. And we saw our community just come out in like just in incredibly generous ways. We just saw how big our community's heart was. And then in 2021 is when we launched Four Rivers Church. And we are, this community here in Seacoast region, about 2% of the population is involved in church on a weekly basis. And so our goal was, we wanted to start a church that the 98% of our
and you're talking about probably like Christmas week and Easter week too. With
exactly. Those are the high point. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And there's we've been involved with. There's a number of great churches in the Seacoast area, and so if people want to go to a church, there's a number of great churches that they can select from in this area. And so we really were burdened like, how do we launch a church that is going to go to the 98% that's going to engage our community? And so going with the Four Rivers Project, we just saw the way that our community responded to this idea of caring for the poor and marginalized and oppressed. Just saw them reach out in incredibly generous ways from that.
And so you've been meeting then as a church since 2021.
Yeah.
And what were just touch, if you would, on the foster care thing you just mentioned. What were some of the foster care things you did?
Yeah, in both for 2020 and 2021 during the holiday season, we saw several just screaming needs. The local business community was really concerned that everyone was staying home and was not going to be coming in. Their businesses were really struggling. The community, the average person was frustrated. They were home, they were locked down, they wanted to do something. And then hearing from those in the foster care community, the needs were going up into the right. So they were really concerned. So we started an initiative called Share the Light, and it brought together local businesses, the community organizations, the town government, chambers of commerce. And it was an initiative where people would go into a local business, they would buy luminary bags that we had one night we called Light the Night. They would light it up in neighborhoods, everything. And 100% of the proceeds would go to kids that were in foster care. So people ended up going into local businesses. The businesses benefited. The community was able to rally around it. The town government, the chambers of commerce, everyone was able to get on board with it. And the first year we raised $6,000 that went to kids in foster care. Next year in 2021 was $7,500 that was raised. And it just it was this sense of like, it was this big table, and the more people that came to the table and the more that people like worked together, the more everyone benefited by working together.
Yeah, it's a great reminder that when we think about, there's a huge need for foster care, obviously, but the solution for all of us isn't necessarily to foster, because not all of us are in that position, but there's tons that can be done to support fostering, even if you don't take foster care kids in yourself. Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so now, not just foster care kids who need taking in, refugees need taking in. So tell us a little bit about the refugee story. How did you get started in it? What made you think to do it? Right.
Yeah.
Give us a little, please.
Yeah. It was, I have no other explanation except for saying that God had his hand completely in the midst of this process, because none of us, including myself and Wes leading this and in our community, had a lot of experience with, or any for that matter, with refugee resettlement. We had been meeting, you asked, about the church meeting. We do meet every Sunday in different ways. We meet in person for a worship service. We meet for a dinner one night where we talk about issues of justice and building community. We meet in small groups and in homes. So we'd been doing that for a period of, I don't know, maybe at that point, 6 months or so, doing some online things because COVID was still happening. And I saw something on one of the Vision New England online newsletters that we get, that are amazing. Something posted about being able to partner with Park Street Church in Boston, and this opportunity for other local churches in New England to engage with Park Street and bringing Afghan refugee family to the area, to our local area. So I just said, I wonder if this is the thing. We have seen our community through things like Share the Light, some of the other initiatives. We have seen our community come out, come alive when we do things that really are honestly what I expect the people that aren't involved in church, what they think churches should be doing,
Yep.
So I reached out to the connections that you had listed at Park Street, and our journey began. That was in December of what year are we in, Wes? That was December 2021. Yes. We met the family that now lives in our next town over from us. We met them late December of 2021, and they moved to our area, a place called Epping, New Hampshire, which is again the next town over from us. They moved at the end of March. They are a family of 9 now. They were a family of 8, but they had a baby while they were here back in the summer, which was incredible. They are an incredible family that I could talk about for hours and hours on end. We did that with a team of about 50 to 60 people, partly those from within Four Rivers Church and those in the community that have nothing to do with church. People we talked about what we wanted to do, having zero idea what we were actually doing, and said, we're trusting God. We're trusting God in this step of faith we're taking, that this is what Jesus calls us to do. And it's been incredible.
Yeah, and you said 60, but it's actually ended up being 160 of total that were involved, and 60 were in the core, but 160 from, and only 40 of those were from Four Rivers Church. 120 were from the broader community.
Yeah, good to clarify.
And so other churches, or not churched, or some combination?
A combination, honestly. I would say a large majority were not people involved with any church at all. We did have one local church partner with us in meeting some of the larger needs, like purchasing a vehicle and some of the furniture. They were incredible in Raymond, New Hampshire. Wonderful. The lead pastor there had a connection prior with Park Street Church, Kevin, and so we've built a beautiful relationship with them. But a large majority.
That's Kevin McBride at Raymond Baptist.
Thank you. Yeah, that's Kevin McBride. He's been a phenomenal partner to us, and in fact, he's the kind of guy when I'm like, Kevin, I feel like we should do this again. He's like, okay, why not? So we really were able to engage. It surprised us, honestly, Charles. We suspected this would be, we didn't know, would this be a small group, 10 people from our church? And it turned into, from the moment we kind of put the word out there in different varieties of social media and just word of mouth, the amount of people that essentially almost came knocking on our door saying, how do I get involved? How can I help? I want to do something. This is incredible. I don't care that it's a church. This is incredible. I want to be a part of it. So I would say it was probably it leaned a little bit more towards unchurched than even the church folks that were part of the team.
And so tell us, and I'm sure there's not a cookie cutter process about this exactly, but I'm sure there's some commonality. But what did it look like for you? So you reach out to Park Street Church, and what was the process then between that and a family showing up in Epping?
Yeah, that's a great question, because again, we didn't understand the process. So there are a couple of in particular, one organization that has really, in addition to Park Street, really walked us through this process. It's an organization that is called Welcome NST. They are locally founded in Massachusetts, actually, but have a national presence now, and really have only been a nonprofit for the last year. Have already resettled almost 100 families through all private sponsor circles. So, and that's essentially what we were, right? So we formed a private sponsor circle. It's a unique way of bringing refugees into the country and into communities. It is not they are not government funded. We weren't supported by the government in financial ways. But basically, it's individual communities that say we can do this. We can change lives. We can invest in lives, and it's a way to really expand the ability to bring refugees to the country. So the process initially was connecting with Park Street Church and the folks part of their community outreach team that were leading this, and they guided us initially through the steps of meeting the family and making the match. There's a little bit of a different setup now, because the process of refugee resettlement is it's ever evolving and it's changing. That there are, I would say, easier ways almost to become sponsor teams and sponsor circles. As a community, a church, a group locally decided they wanted to bring a family here. It really is, the first step is connecting with an organization that has the ability to match families in countries like, now this is primarily focused in Ukraine. The Afghan borders have been closed since that initial exodus of 100,000 Afghanis. But for example, through Ukraine resettlement, you find organizations that can match local teams with families that are needing to get out of the country.
Mm-hmm. And so, and Park Street, of course, is also working with World Relief, who's another piece of this in terms of that whole matchup. So once you get hooked up with them, you're working with their network too, which is really useful. And so, but you're saying things that if you guys are a smaller church, right? Because you're only been in business for a year, bad term, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing housing, car, furniture. How did all that happen?
Yeah. I would say the commitment that you make is a 2-year commitment to be a wayfinding community. And what does that mean? Whatever it takes. And so, yeah, like housing, getting enrolled in school, finding a job, navigating and connecting like state benefits, whatever, finding, halal meat, whatever it takes is what the wayfinding community goes. And yeah, you get that training and the resources. I mean, Park Street and World Relief have been massive. Helps Welcome NST as well. But it's with that training, you have to have the volunteers, and that's where I would say Kasey's the one who's led the team, and we put the word out, and Kasey's just done an incredible job of leading and developing and taking people who showed up willing, and then Kasey's just been phenomenal at seeing what is sort of the special, unique, both gifting that a person has, but also seeing sort of like what their passion is and sort of matching need and passion. And we've seen over and over again, from my perspective, it's been so fun to watch just so many people come alive, and for many of them, it came at a point in their lives that they're just like this. They've been looking for something like this. And we've often said, I'm not sure who this helped out more. Our community and our broader community has benefited just as much as families have been able to help, because it's just been, it was something that people in our community needed as a way to invest.
I think I think, Charles, there's a really good story that we tell often now that really, I think, gives a great example of what this looks like practically. Once all those details, I mean, it's a lot of details, but there are government and non-government organizations that do provide a crazy amount of support when teams take this on. And it's heavy lifting, but it's not. It's like the work of the gospel, and it's beautiful. It's just amazing. But I tell this story that we had an Easter service that we did outside this last year. And the family that we brought here from Afghanistan is Muslim. They are a Muslim family. We've had lovely, wonderful conversations with them about faith. And I invited them to come to our Easter service to experience what it was. And they said, sure, we'd love to be there. At that time, they didn't have a license, so they couldn't drive. There's a lot of them. So I reached out to a woman in our community who's been a key part of the church, who is Jewish, key part of the refugee resettlement team, who is Jewish. She said to me, okay, so let me get this straight. You're asking a Jewish woman to bring a Muslim family to a Christian Easter service on Passover. Sure, I'm totally in, and it's a favorite story of mine because it shows, I think, what the original hope and plan of the church, the local church, is anyway. It's this idea that we come from all walks of life with all different journeys and backgrounds and stories. And we don't all think the same or feel the same or believe the same, but it was just this beautiful picture of, and again, how this example, refugee resettlement, brought a whole group of folks together to do something really purposeful.
Well, I think that there's significance in that, right? Because on the one hand, look, we're told to care for the immigrants. We're told to love people. These are clearly people in need, right? So we're answering, right, very clearly our call, but it's also opening the doors to evangelism with the community, where people are seeing, one of the biggest issues we have is we often deal with the stereotype of what the church is, not the reality of what the church is. And sometimes the stereotype is the reality, but in this case, it's not. And having people see, this is what the Church of Jesus does, is a witness to the people you're working with and a witness to this family. And worst case, you're found being faithful, doing what God told us to do anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love that. There's a phrase that I hear often, and it tells me it's become sort of a sign to me that this is someone that God's working in their life. They'll say to me, Wes, I don't believe what you believe, but I love what you're doing. That's a good thing. Keep doing that. And then they'll say, if you ever need anything, let me know. I'd love to help. And that always, to me, has been sort of like a tap on the shoulder from the Holy Spirit. Like, this is where, something's at work here in this person's life. One of the things that we found, because this has been one of the most effective ways to engage our secular, unchurched community. Again, less than 2% of the population is involved in church on a regular basis. At UNH, it's less than 1% of the student population that is involved. And so I think what we have seen, as I kind of zoom out and look at this, is that our community they're really frustrated. They see events going on in the world. They see massive humanitarian crises like Afghanistan or like Ukraine. And they've got almost unlimited resources of finance, of opportunity, of education, of influence, but they don't have access to be able to make an impact. And that's something that the Church of Jesus is uniquely suited to do, to bring that kind of connection. And so, sometimes people ask me, like, well, where does the gospel come into this? And the question I've learned to ask back is like, well, what's the right way to invite people to follow Jesus? And if you lead with mission, or if you lead with worship, like what this is, it's proven to be a really compelling pathway for people to say, like, I want to practice my faith, and we see it moving kind of like from a hand to a heart to a head, kind of a flow.
Yeah, and you guys are living out what we see all the time is when we disadvantage ourselves to serve and love other people, they care what we have to say about Jesus, right? Until then, you're just like anybody else, right? And if Jesus works, at best case, if Jesus works for you, that's fine. I don't need that, right? But suddenly, when you're disadvantaged yourself, there's something different about that, right?
For sure. There's another story that I like to tell that I think I hope that churches would find encouraging if they were considering doing something like this, or just thinking about it. Right, the wheels are just starting to turn. We were part of doing an AP News article. They had invited us to do an article with the family from Afghanistan. And I was part of the Zoom interview, and we had a translator and the woman out in Southern California, the journalist. And the last thing she said to Mohammed was, "Is there anything that you would say to other refugee families about your experience with coming here with a private sponsor circle, a neighborhood support team?" They're all the sort of synonymous terms. And he said, let's see if I can say this without crying, because it still gets me every time. He said in very good English, he said, "I would tell people to go find a church because churches are good and they help people." And I said, if we can influence, if we can have that kind of impact or influence on folks individually, just one relationship, one person, one experience at a time, man, the local church could be what it was intended to be. Go find a church; they're good and they help people.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And so that's a good place to end on that story, in fact. So thank you very much. And I will say, if there's somebody listening to this and is feeling convicted, called, interested, reach out to us and we'll get you in touch with Kasey and Wes. We'll get you in touch with Park Street, so you can pursue it too. But guys, Kasey, Wes, thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks for sharing this story, and thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's an incredible privilege. Yeah.
It's an honor to be able to talk about it and share some of our experiences. So thanks for having us.
Thanks. And so I'd also like to thank Jess Mangano. She's our producer, our listeners. I hope this dialogue helps us be the people of God doing the work of God to transform our world. Visit visionnewengland.org for past episodes and resources. Click on Donate to partner with us to accelerate evangelism in New England. This program is brought to you by our friends at the Luis Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide.